Hello, and welcome back to the Onward Shift podcast. We have Rob with us today, and rather than me messing up an introduction, I'd rather you do it, Rob, if that's all right. So, yeah, Rob, please, introduction would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Rob Muldoon from the NYH podcast.
Awesome. So, Rob, tell me a bit about yourself. Like, obviously, I've followed you on LinkedIn. Absolutely love the content you're pushing out to support construction workers with mental health challenges. But I'd love to know more about, why have you started this? What's your background? Why is mental health play such a huge part for you? And what you're trying to achieve with the, I guess, construction industry? Because I think we're both on the same page, but I'd love to just learn a bit more about you.
Yeah, so I've worked in construction now for 25 years. Started off
Okay.
as an apprentice bricklayer for a big brickwork contractor up in Manchester, and worked for that company for 21, 22 years. And over that time, I've worked my way up to be a project manager for them, running all the big projects I used to work on. And from the outside looking in, everything looked like it was going great. Part of big teams, earning good money, worked
Okay.
on Man City's training ground, Coronation Street Studios when they moved to when they moved in Manchester. I worked on BBC stuff, MOD projects, prisons, schools,
Oh
hospitals,
wow.
all stuff like that. And like I say, from the outside looking in, everything like it was going great. But all I was doing was just totally and utterly destroying myself, and it was not because of the contractor that I was working for. It was because of my attitude towards mental health and well-being, because there's just a massive stigma around it, that subject in this industry, how we choose to ignore it and all the signs and all the things that are there. But I chose to just bury myself in the sand and pretend everything was all right and nothing was bothering me and I'm all right, I can keep going, that sort of attitude. And then till one day I couldn't, and I just had a big breakdown. And then that was a point where I had to get a bit of help and support, which I did. I had a bit of time off, got myself back on my feet, got myself better, and I continued with my job for a few years. Because again, it was nothing to do with my job, but there's elements of my job that played its part, but it was stuff that was going on in my life that I was struggling with, and excuse me, choosing not to deal
Bless
with
you.
it
Bless you.
was one of the problems. But I came back to work, carried on with my job for a few years, and I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this, because my biggest problem was I wasn't talking about what I was going through and how I was feeling and what was happening in my life. And I thought, I'm not the only one that's
Hmm.
like this. I know I'm not the only one like
Yeah.
this. So I started a podcast. I started it in 2020, in the midst of all the
Hmm.
chaos of everything that went on that year. But I worked all the way through that. And
Wow.
one day I thought, right, my biggest problem was I'm not talking, or I wasn't talking, and the podcast is all about talking. People could
Yeah.
be in the canteen, driving to work, working away with the headphones in, and they could be listening to somebody else within this industry going through something similar that they're going through, or not realizing they're going through. Then they can think, that's me. I'm that person. And if they can do it, so
Yeah.
can I. And ultimately, it's about building hope and giving people permission to start talking. And once I did that, it sort of grown arms and legs, and I'm no longer a project manager. I pretty much do mental health and wellbeing awareness work and podcast work and talks, and go in and help deliver training all across the country in the industry. And it's now my full-time job now.
Wow. Mate, I can that's a lot to digest in just a couple minutes. I think that's firstly I want to start by saying thank you for sharing that, because that I didn't expect it to be so vulnerable so quickly. But
I'll
it
take that
takes real
anything.
courage to, mate, that's amazing, because it takes so much courage to actually, one, accept what you're going through, and then two, it takes even more courage to actually come out in the open and be vulnerable. And I think as a guy, I'll share a bit about myself.
Yeah,
Similar
absolutely.
to you, I took 13 weeks off work. And I haven't told many people this, but I would be waking up in the morning at like 2 o'clock and having to go for walks because of severe anxiety. And it didn't necessarily have much to do with the actual job, but it was that outside life that then actually does affect you at work. And I think there's this thing, right, where they say, "Oh, keep your work problems at work and your home problems at home." But we're human beings. And I just don't believe that's possible. Like, there may be some people who can naturally do it, who can go, you know what, work's work, home's home, but I couldn't do it. And what ended up happening was my reputation at work was going down because I couldn't manage both. So I ended up taking 13 weeks off work and seeing a psychiatrist to get the support I needed. And it's a shame your podcast wasn't out when I was, 23, 24, because that would have hugely helped. But I'm thankful it is now. And we are having this conversation because someone will listen to it and go, shit, there's two guys talking about something I'm going through right now. And that means it doesn't make you less of a man because you're seeking help. Let's forget about men in general. It doesn't make you less of a person if you're seeking help. So yeah, God, you've completely taken me by surprise. We've gone in deep.
I guess that's the point, that we exactly like you said, we do need to start having these conversations, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just because I've got stuff going on in my life, because I've still got stuff going on in my life right now, and I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm still trying to deal with it and understand it and work through it. And it doesn't mean I can't go out and lay the bricks I used to, and it doesn't mean I can't go out and run the projects that I used to run. It just means I've got stuff going on in my life right now, and I'm choosing to deal with it instead of burying my head in the sand and ignoring it and pretending everything's all right, and I don't get any of that stuff. Because stigma around this subject in this industry taught me to never, ever, ever, ever talk about it. And that's why I make it like a point now to talk about and be vulnerable. And I don't care if somebody's listening to this and thinking, grow up or man up or whatever. Cool, that's your opinion. But I'm doing this now because I know there's people listening to these things, these podcasts and the stuff that goes out on social media and everything like that, and they need to hear it. They might not realise they need to hear it, but they need to hear it because they're going through it right now. And it can be a very, very, very lonely place if you don't deal with it. And like you said, it got to a point where you had to take time off. You had to take 13 weeks off work. And I always use an analogy of the tipper skips or a skip or a bin or anything like that. And imagine filling those tipper skips up that you see out on site every single day, filling it to the top. And instead of ringing the forklift driver up to say, can you come and empty this skip for me? You ring a machine driver and he'll track over with his machine, or they'll track over with the machine and say to him, just squash that down, please, kid. I need to fit a bit more crap in it. So they'll squash it down for you and you fill it to the top again, or you overfill it to the top. And again, instead of ringing up and emptying it, you get it crushed down. And can you imagine repeating that cycle for years and years and years and years? I'll skip a break, wouldn't it? Because it can't carry the load that it's being put under. And we're exactly the same. We fill ourselves with so much stuff and we bury it down and we ignore it and pretend everything's all right. We don't talk about this stuff and we just get on, we show face and nothing bothers us because we're rough, tough construction workers and we're all right and we don't have anything that goes on in our lives. And then all of a sudden you find yourself like the pair of us have gone through and you can't cope with it. And for some people, they push themselves to the extreme and they take permanent decision to a temporary problem because everything's fixable. You might not think it, you might not feel it, but I promise you everything's fixable, but you just got to talk about it. And that's the first step. It's the hardest step, reaching out and asking for that help. And then you might not know how to speak, or you might not know how to say it, or you might not understand it, but just get it out of you in any which way you can. And it might take you 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 attempts to do that, to have that conversation with somebody. But there is people out there that are willing to listen to you. And if you can dump it out of you, I promise it starts to get better.
You know what, Rob? I can't emphasize how right you are here, but I will share this story because you're right. People may have their opinions about it, but that's okay because I'm comfortable sharing this. And that's the first time I sat opposite my psychiatrist. I was paying her £150 an hour, and she literally, she just spoke, and then it was just silent because I didn't want to talk. Like, my lips were shut. When I mean shut, I mean like I was like, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. What is it gonna benefit by me talking about my shit? And nobody really cares. These are all the thoughts I had in my head. And the funniest thing is, I think it got to the third session, and she said, "You know what, Vish? Let's not talk today. But you're still gonna pay me." And I said to her, yeah, you're actually onto something here. This is costing me a fortune. I better start speaking. And the initial conversations we had were honestly pointless. Like, it was, well, I thought they were pointless, but it was building that relationship and it was actually creating a safe space. And it was creating an environment where I felt comfortable and didn't feel judged and I didn't feel like ill, like I'm a guy of emotions. But instead, like by the fifth, the sixth, the seventh session, I was really opening up. And it was that whole path is never spoken about. Like people think they go to therapy the first time and they go, oh no, it was rubbish. Like, didn't achieve anything. But it's sad, but you have to consistently go and you have to believe in it because it's not easy though. It's really hard to be vulnerable, it's especially to a stranger. Like, how can we today educate other people who are listening and say it's okay to be vulnerable? Like, it's so hard, but it's also so okay. How can we do that? It's such a battle.
It is such a battle, and that's why there's people like yourself and me and all the other people that are out doing it now, is encouraging people to do that and encouraging to speak. And they might have to see 2, 3, 5, 50, 150 videos that you put out. But I think for me, it's like constantly turning up and being consistent and letting people know that you can talk about this stuff. And like say, being vulnerable myself. Like when I do the talks out on site, honestly, Bishop, I've cried my eyes out doing it because it's heavy talking about this stuff all the time. And I've done it in front of hundreds of people. I did Derby, did a big project in Derby. It was a big distribution centre that was being built. It was a red hot day, and there was a corner of the site that was shaded. So we were all in there, and there's about 350 people working on that of all sorts of different trades and abilities and background within the industry, from the apprentices up to people that have been in 45 years in the industry. And I stood and I delivered the talk, and it was quite a prominent time in my life. It was back in July this was, and I was having trouble with the kids, and one of them, my eldest boy, he didn't want to come and see me because I've recently separated. It's been 18 months now, but I separated, and I'm trying to find a level that works with the kids. And Seb, my eldest lad, has really struggled with it, and he was at a point where he didn't want to look at me, he didn't want to come near me, he kept running away from me. I'd been working in Scotland, I'd finished a day early the week before, I'd driven all 280 miles home, I'd gone to his sports day, and he'd won his race. I went and watched him, but I was stood on my own because of, and I think this is another thing that doesn't get spoken about, all the other parents in that schoolyard, or no, that's not right. A lot of the other parents in that schoolyard wouldn't come near me, they wouldn't look at me, they wouldn't talk to me, because I had separated and I was being seen as the bad guy. And driven back, gone to see my eldest lad on his sports day, and obviously after he'd done that, I went into the playground to try and speak to him, and he ran away from me. He didn't want to speak to me. And then the following week, I went out on site and I told that story, and it upset me because it's raw and it's still happening in my life at that time. And I broke down doing the talk. And Andy, the lad who was out with me, was like, "Do you need me to take over?" I was like, "No, no." I'll be honest with you, Bish. What I actually said is like, "No, these fuckers can watch me cry, because I'm a human being at the end of the day. I'm not a robot. I'm not made of stone. I'm not a piece of wood. I'm a real human being with feelings, and I was hurting at that time. And I let people see that, and I let people feel that. And then I finished the talk. Then Andy came on and spoke to them all, and he was like, "It's difficult to see a grown man crying." And they were like, "Yeah." And they didn't know how to handle that situation. But what I can tell you is not one of them took the piss out of me. Not one of them had anything bad to say. I don't know how many hugs I had that day off big, burly construction workers. People that were weathered, and people that had worked in this industry a long time, had seen it all before, and were probably naysayers before this came and watched the talk. But after I'd done that and been so vulnerable with them, they got it and they understood it. And their story might be a bit different to mine, but they could understand the feelings that I was going through because they felt them, and they've not, like, a lot of the time I didn't know how to express those feelings. So instead of expressing the feeling I was feeling, because I knew and I understood anger, I could turn it into anger because I knew how to deal with that feeling, and I knew how to handle that feeling, and knew what to do with that. So that's what I used to do with it. But then, instead of pushing it down and ignoring it and turning it into anger, I just let myself feel that feeling, as daft as it sounds, and I just let it out. And nobody judged me, and nobody took the piss, like I said. And off the back of that, when I went and carried on for the rest of the week, I was okay because I got rid of that emotion that was inside me. Instead of holding it in here or sitting in my face or turning it into anger, I felt it, I dealt with it, I got rid of it, and then I carried on with my day. I carried on with my job, and I'm not here to say right, everybody's got to go around crying their eyes out all the time. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you feel like you're getting overwhelmed with emotion, you don't understand how to deal with it or how to process it, then reach out and speak to somebody. We both spoke to therapists, and they've helped us deal with that side of things and helps us deal with emotion and help us understand more than anything, because we don't get taught a lot of this stuff. And then we finish school and we go into college or university, and then we go into the working world, and then you got to put your big boy pants on, and you do have to show face, and you do have to be certain things like that. But it's knowing how to use resilience in the right way, and that's what I try and teach people now: is resilience more than anything. And to, okay, right, I need to deal with this section now with what's going on in my life, but I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to work through it so I can be there for the people that need me. And it's hard. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
That's a lot. That's a lot, Rob. I think before we go into it, I just want to ask, how are you right now? That's a lot to have gone through, happened in your life, and it wasn't that long ago. Generally speaking, how are you?
Generally, I can sit here today, Vish, and say I'm really, really good. Got stuff going on, and I'm still trying to deal with it. I'm still juggling a lot of stuff and spinning a lot of plates. But because I'm looking after myself, and because I'm leaning into help and support that's out there, and because I'm not internalizing it all, and because I'm actually focusing on it, I'm able to deal with it. And yes, I still have sleepless nights, and yes, stuff still worries me, but it doesn't consume me. It's not in my every move and my every decision making, and it allows me to do other stuff. Like this week is quite a down week for me, because you messaged me a few weeks ago and said, "Oh, can you do them?" I was like, "No, I'm back to back up until that." But this week I'm actually sat editing a podcast, and that'll come out probably next week. But Friday I've got a talk to do, and then but Thursday I'm going to get out on the bike. I don't care what the weather's like. I'm going to get out. I'm going to do something for me, because it's important to feed back into me. And I'll piss and I'll scream and I'll swear that I don't want to go out on this bike ride, but when I do it, I'll know I'll feel better for it. And it's important to make time for me so I can deal with that stuff and I can work through it. And again, it's emptying that bin or that tipper skip that I was telling you about.
Rob, I'll be honest with you. I've done a few podcasts now, and they don't go as deep as this, but I really want to say thank you so much for sharing that already, because these are the difficult conversations we must have to allow people to realize that it's okay. It's okay to feel shit. It's okay to be hurt. And it's okay to have these emotions. And it's okay to grieve. Like, I can give you a little bit about my past. And, if we went to a funeral, men didn't cry. And if a man did cry at a funeral, it would be like, he would be looked down upon. He would be seen as less of a man. I've seen some really, really tough men have to go upstairs and cry in their bedroom rather than cry in front of people. And I think I'm not the only guy who has experienced that, but I have been taught that having emotions isn't the right thing, but using anger is. So, through my childhood, it would be, I'd see kids in school punching lockers and, doing other really, really crazy stuff, because I feel like we were taught to be that. But now we're breaking out of that cycle, and we're speaking more about be in tune with your emotions. And a lot of guys will be like, that sounds so pathetic. Like, what is that going to achieve? But the truth is, by offloading it, you're allowing yourself to heal. And nobody speaks about this stuff. This is real deep stuff. Rob, I didn't think we would get into this conversation today, but I'm so glad we have. Because this is real. This is like real conversation. This is the stuff that two men who have never met each other before wouldn't have. So I'm so grateful that you've been vulnerable, because that's allowed me to be vulnerable and kind of say, like, you're right. Offloading is a huge part of moving forward. And I think you've just demonstrated that with your extremely powerful story, Rob. And you've involved the hurt from your children, and that, I don't think there's much pain in this world that equates to what you went through 6 months ago. Loneliness, isolation, and your child walking away from you and then being vulnerable and crying in front of men. And God, there's so much we can
well,
really
there is a good
speak
answer
about.
to that. It was my weekend to have the kids this weekend, and I had the lad that was talking about my eldest lad. He was round with me this weekend, and he didn't want to. Not that he didn't want to go back to his mum, but it's like, can we do more? Can I have more nights here? And he's telling me he loves me again, and he tells me he wants to come and see me. And like Sam, the youngest lad, he was ill this last week. We thought he was going to get chicken pox, but he didn't. He just had a raging temperature, and I'd FaceTimed to see how he was doing, and Seb, the oldest lad, ended up taking the phone off Sam after about 30 seconds, and he sat there talking to me about Barcelona versus Real Madrid and what he's done in the playground that day, and he still thinks Messi's better than Ronaldo, and I told him I think he's wrong, but that's up to him, and all those sort of conversations, and that's all come from consistency and turning up and being determined and not giving up hope, which again is easy for me to sit here and say this because I've pushed through and I've done the hard work. And Vish, as you know, you've got to put the graft in. You've got to put the graft in. But if you do put it in, I promise you, you get the results. And I'm starting to see the results.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question? Because something that I've always been, I guess, ashamed of, and that's a strong word to use, but that's just my feeling. So that's just how I feel. And that's when I am open and honest about how I feel. If I'm sad or if I've got anxiety or, and sometimes you share and then you walk away feeling cringy. You feel like, that feeling of ill. I don't know how better to explain it, but how do you overcome that? Like for me personally, I still feel it. Like I've done 6 years of therapy and I still feel that feeling. And I think a lot of guys feel that feeling. I think people in general feel that feeling of I've been over vulnerable, I've been overshared, and then it prevents them ever doing it again. So how, other than creating safe spaces, how can that person, that individual, feel comfortable?
I think it's learning to let go of what other people's opinions are of yourself. And I think you feel that cringiness inside you because you think, oh, they've judged me there and I don't want to feel like that, or they've said this to me, or I've said this. I relate when people have asked me that in the past. I say to them, in fact, what I say to them, when people have come and been really vulnerable with me, I tell them to do a bit of mindfulness, go and take a bit of time for themselves, because you're probably going to get that exact feeling what you suggested. But the way I say it to them is like, have you ever been out on a night out and you've got drunk and you wake up the next morning and you have that beer fear and think, what have I said? Who did I kiss? What did you do on that night out? Do you know what I mean? And you wake up with that, and it's that, it's anxiety inside you, isn't it? It's that anxiety that you feel. And you're letting that feeling own you because it's come on by you're worried about what other people are thinking and saying about you. And once you let go of that, and again, it's easy for me to sit here, and it's taken me years to get to that point. But that's because for years I ignored it and not dealing with it. But now I have dealt with it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm owning this, and I'm feeling like this, and this is happening to me right now, and I'm doing my best to get through it. I did a talk last week, one of the days last week, and I started the talk with, I'm riddled with anxiety right now, and I've been taking the piss. I've been having a laugh with them. I've been doing all sorts of stuff with them beforehand. And I said, does anybody in this room or anybody on this site know who would have thought I was riddled with it? And they're like, no, because we wear this mask to hide it, and we don't want people to know about it because we're scared of what people are going to think and say. And I think that might be those feelings that you're having might be a hangover from that. So you're understanding, you're accepting those feelings, and you're working through those feelings, but those feelings are still owning you at the minute. And once you learn to let go of those feelings and people's opinions, it starts to ease and fade, and you'll do it, and you'll forget about it, or you won't even realise that you've been in a scenario where you've felt like you've overshared. And probably as well, the people that you speak to, I probably never had to deal with a conversation like that before, and they might be like, oh, Navish, why have you told me that? But it's because they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't understand it, and they're probably going through a similar thing. Or you might have said something that might have touched a nerve in them, and they've gone, I feel a bit like that, and Do you know what I mean? They don't know how to work through it because might not have done any work on themselves yet. But what you could have done, and I think a big thing that helps me as well, definitely helps me, is that yes, I've been vulnerable. Yes, they might take the piss. And yes, they might have an opinion of me about it. But I've been like that with them, and I might have started them on their journey of reaching out, getting a bit of help and support, and that will make them feel better. They might not realise it now, but in X amount of time down the line,
true.
they could come back and think about that conversation that you had with them, or I had with them, or anybody else that's doing this work out there I've had with them, and that can be the difference. So I think owning it is the thing to in a nutshell. I know I've gone round the houses a bit there, but own it. Try not to worry about other people's opinions, and realise that you are being vulnerable, but it's good for people to see vulnerability in other people, in peers, because that's why things like Andy's Man, the club, does so well, because it's people being vulnerable in front of people, just peer-to-peer support.
You know, as you were talking there, I took myself back to a building site. So a bit of background, I'm an electrician by trade, and 14 years I've spent doing that. And as you were talking, I took myself back to a job I was on in King's Cross. It was student accommodation, huge. I think it was 1,200 student accommodation. It was going up quick. And there was this guy there, right? And he was a big geezer. Like, he was a big boy. Like, you know. And one day he come into it, and he was one of those guys who was just like, I don't know how to say that. He's got so much energy. Like, he was loud. He was, that type of guy. He was like loud. He was bubbly. He was full of energy. He was like, I'll carry 20 lamps of conduit. Forget 10. 10 ain't enough. He was that guy. And one day we see him and he was down. He was so down. And we were looking at him like, what's wrong? Like, just not poking him, giving him a little, bit of barging, just like being typical guys. And he broke down. And you know what? I regret that now, because instead of sitting there with him, I walked away because I was so uncomfortable with that environment that I just had to walk away. But when I was young, naive to the situation, but I think conversations like this will kind of go out to younger people and go, or anyone, and kind of go, those are the times you got to stick it out. Those are the difficult conversations you have to allow people to be in a safe space. And I don't think construction is one of the safest environments out there, physically and emotionally.
It is a different perspective on that, right? So I hear what you're saying to me there, and I hear that you're saying that you feel bad and guilty for the way you treated that individual at that time. So but at that time, you didn't know and you didn't understand how to deal with those situations. So think of it this way. When you were younger and you were learning to read, you didn't know all the words, did you? And you had to work through it. But you couldn't be angry at young Bish for not knowing how to read that book that he was trying to read when he was younger, because he didn't know and he didn't understand it. And this is very similar. That you might have those feelings and regret inside, but that's only because you've got a different perspective on it now, and you understand those feelings and you've worked through that. So the best thing to do is, going forward, if you ever find yourself in one of those situations again, you know how to handle it differently. And it's only like when you first started doing it, when you're an electrical apprentice, you might have looked at the electricians that you were working with, and you might have thought, I'll never be as good as them. I'll never be able to do all the wiring and all everything else that they do. Whereas now, you've been doing it 14 years, and you can look back at the time and realise how much you've grown and how much you've learned and how much you've developed. And this story that you said there, you can look back at that story and use that as your fuel to go forward, because you'll know that, right, I've grown and I've evolved and I understand and I've learned. So now moving forward, I never want to be that person again, and I never want to be in that space again, and I never want to have those feelings inside me, so I'm going to do my best not to do.
And for those listening to this podcast who are scared of being vulnerable, but they just need to offload, but sadly they can't afford coaching or they can't afford therapy, and they're in a group of people which don't really understand mental health or shrug it off. What can we say today for that one person who's listening? What is it that they can do and kind of go, I'm in a safe space and I'm being heard?
If they work in construction, they can reach out to Lighthouse. Lighthouse
Yeah, Lighthouse support.
Construction Industry Charity, they offer coaching, therapy, financial support, physical support, all for free. You can use
Yeah.
it as many times as you want. It's not a one-time deal. You can ring them on, I'll send you all the details, but you can ring them on 0345 605 1956, or you can text hardhat to 85258, or you can go on the website, which is lighthouseclub.org, or you can download the app, which is free to download on all platforms, or you can scan one of the many QRs on the posters that you see around site. There's loads of different ways. It doesn't matter how you contact them, and they can provide that support for you. Or you could follow ourselves on social media, because we met through LinkedIn, but I do a lot on Instagram and stuff like that, YouTube. There's always stuff like that. There's a lot of groups out there that you can join that are, again, like peer-to-peer support groups that are, like on the Lighthouse website, they have things called beacons, and they're like peer-to-peer stuff. There's Andy's Man's Club. There's local stuff in the area. You can ring, I think it's 111 option 2, which is mental health support people through the NHS. But again, there's a big long waiting list for that. You can speak to your GP. Your GP can help you with that. If it's anything like my GP, it takes them 9 months to answer the phone call. You can download an app called Hub of Hope, and on that Hub of Hope, you put in your location. I think it takes your location, and it brings up everything that's in your area and facilities that are available to you to reach out and get that help and support. Or you could find a different group of friends, or somebody that you could see, or maybe just be vulnerable with your friends, because there's probably people within your friends group that are feeling exactly the same as you and have the same hold-ups of not talking about this stuff. And then once you start doing it, you'd be amazed at where the conversations go.
Absolutely. God, that's so much amazing information. But like, I do like blogs on my website as well, and at the bottom of them, Lighthouse Charity, Shout UK, I think Band of Builders and Samaritans are on there. So there's 4 charities with their contact details there. So, you know, I would love it if you could share any more with me, and then I can put it in the bio so that people who are maybe scared to ask the question or ping an email to either of us, they don't need to. They can just, there's the information. They've been put in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, you speak about Andy's Club. Is that the walking one? Is that the walk and talk one?
They're all over the country.
Yeah, they're all out there.
There's loads of individual ones. They're like regional stuff, but it was set up by somebody's, a guy called Andy, I think, took his own life, and his mum set up this club. It's grown into a big charity, and it's all peer-to-peer support group. I think they meet once a week on a Monday, I think it is. There'll definitely be one in your local area. There's like walking and talking groups as well that I know that are out there. There's loads of support. You'll find once you start looking for it, you will, I promise you will start to find stuff that's in your local area. Because a lot of people want to do face-to-face. You could go to those group sessions and you're like, yeah, actually this works for me, group stuff, and you can say as much as you want or as little as you want, and you might just sit every week and just come and be in that space, and you don't have the whole conversation, but you're surrounding yourself and building yourself up to a point where you do feel comfortable to speak about it. Because it might, like I said before, it might take 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 attempts to get this information out of you. Because, like you were saying, Bish, you went and was sat in front of a trained professional, and you were struggling to talk about stuff because you were so conditioned not to talk about it. You have to work that out and try and eke it out here. And there's loads of ways of sorting it. It's just taking that initial first step to reach out.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think in the construction industry, there's so much negative association with mental health, but it's so refreshing to hear like your story. There's actually, in the more recent times, more and more people are coming together and they're speaking about their issues, and it's becoming actually a little bit more relatable, isn't it? As in, like, you can go onto Google and you can, or YouTube, and type in the construction whatever, and things are starting to come up now where people are sharing their stories, which is, I think there's nothing more powerful than someone sharing their story, because people will learn from that forever.
Yeah, definitely. And it just builds on that people aren't alone. People's stories might be a little bit different, and the circumstances how people got to that point might be a little bit different, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they all need a bit of help and support.
Absolutely, 100%. In all honesty, Rob, I think I'm still digesting majority of this conversation. This has been a deep conversation, and I think sometimes you just need to process everything that's been said, because it's such a powerful thing to come out and be this vulnerable so quickly. You've 100% taken me by surprise. And I think people listening to this podcast usually ease into it, don't you? But this one's been full steam ahead, which is actually fantastic. It's brilliant that it just shows you can be vulnerable. You can open up. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I'm just trying to think in my head of everything we've spoken
if you
about.
ever want to do a part 2 and you think about it and go, actually, I want to ask this, do it. Let's do it. I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. But I think some of the things that I would like to focus on, as well as that side of things, is the issues in construction. I think everyone knows that you can't leave work issues at work and home issues at work, but I really want to focus on the issues in construction and build awareness, but not negative awareness, but more positive awareness around, the working conditions, such as, the portaloos, the canteens, and how that affects the mental health of construction workers. Because we've both been in the industry, and I've always found you wouldn't expect, let's say, a HR manager to use the same portaloo as a painter or a decorator, because I feel it affects the mindset of construction workers. What's your thoughts on the conditions contractors have to work in?
So when I started back in 2000, it really was like that, and you'd be eating your lunch out on site, or you'd be sat in your van doing it, and you would go to the toilet. It'd be horrendous. It'd be like a scene out of Train Spotting when it goes into that Bucky's. But I think the industry realised we need to change this, and we need to change the welfare facilities for people on site, and they did pull the socks up, and it did get a lot better. And I was fortunate to work a majority of my career on sites that were like that. But then in the same breath, I've worked on sites where it's been horrendous. And when I've spoken to people about it, when I've been out and doing work on site now, doing the work that I do now, I say to them, like, look, I'm not here to judge your facilities or your site, but this is having a massive impact. Look at the state. Would you eating it? And then they'll turn around to me and say, yeah, but they've made it this way. I'm like, yeah, no, I understand that, and I hear that. But if you were coming in and using this toilet over and over and over again, and it looked like that, would you treat it the same way? And they were like,
of course.
well, yeah. I'm like, well, maybe look at changing it up a bit. Maybe look at getting decent facilities. And then if it gets to a point, because I worked on one site in Liverpool where graffiti was just everywhere in the toilets. The toilets themselves were all right, but people were just graffitiing everywhere. And it got to the point where obviously the cameras weren't facing where the actual urinals were and the toilets themselves. We could see who was going in and out of the toilets, and they had to change it, and that did stop all that. But the people, if they're in crappy shitty conditions, they'll treat it shitty because they think, well, what's the point? They don't care about us, and why should I care about them? And it's not only that as well. There's a lot of issues with gangs on site, like running big teams of concrete. For instance, there's always a big thing about concrete. I've worked on a project where teams were coming in from other countries, and immigration came in. I felt really sorry for the person who was running the concrete teams on there. But modern slavery is quite a big thing. Where like hotbed, have you ever heard the term hotbedding? It's like hotbedding.
Yes.
It's like hot desking, but it's with a bed. People are literally jumping in and out of bed and doing shift patterns on these concrete floors. And there's big issues with that going in there, and the industry's clamping down on that. And that's not to say it's still going on. There's people's attitudes towards mental health. Well, get on with it. What have you got to worry about? You ain't got anything to worry. You've got loads of work in front of you and all this. People need to change. I used to get told that I need to tell more people to F off in meetings. I'm like, nah, I don't need to, because I can speak to them in a certain way and I end up getting more out of them. And I think as that older generation within the industry are coming to the twilight years and starting to come up to retirement age, hopefully a lot of those mindsets and those opinions are changing. And to be fair to that group, their opinions are changing now because they're realising that, you know what, I actually felt like that and I can talk about this and I don't have to have that stone face on all the time. And I don't have to go away and sit in the van and cry my eyes out, or like you say, go home and go and sit and do it. They can show emotion and they can be vulnerable, but it's taken a long time to get to that point. And it's only, hopefully, it's only going to encourage more people to come into the industry because they're seeing that construction workers, you have to be rough and tough to get on with a job, but you can have this other side to you. And I think, is it 500,000 tradespeople short every single year coming into this industry, and we need to encourage more and more people to come in. So why would you want to come and work on a site where they'll come and take the piss out of you, and you do have to use rubbish facilities, and you are going to be marginalised, and you are going to made to feel stupid when you can go and work in one of the many sports shops and earn £13 an hour, something like that, whatever. But if we can make the industry more appealing to the younger generation coming out of school and want to come in and want to do that, because there's still people out there that are practical people, because I'm a practical person and so is yourself. I'm more practical than I am than the paperwork side of this. And that's what the industry needs. It needs more people coming into this industry, and we need to attract them, so hopefully people can start changing their attitudes towards it.
I think there's so many bits you touch on, and I think right now we're talking about the bigger building sites, the ones with hundreds of guys on it. But even if we drop that down to just a house renovation, majority of the time there's not a working toilet there, so you end up using the garden, or you find the closest Mackie D's and you go for a slash there. Then they do get a portaloo on site, and they stink so horrendously that you just want to vomit. So you'd rather just either hold it in or go back home and come back. And I think this isn't talking negatively about it. This is just building awareness around the situation in hope that things will get better. But I think there's something we need to touch on this, and that's it does affect your mental well-being when your facilities aren't good. Like when we look at even construction sites, so the bigger ones in London, the canteen will also be used as a changing room. So it stinks of sweat and feet and dirty socks and all the rest of it. But you're also eating your food there. So now you've got sweat and food all mixed into probably a basement somewhere, And I think all of this needs to have appropriate facilities in different parts of the building to really start inspiring contractors to go, okay, I work on a building site. Yes, it's dusty. Yes, it's dirty. Yes, it's whatever, but at least I'm cared for, and I think you touched on it, and I think that's such an important topic to really push out there. I remember working on a building site where the toilet was on the ground floor, but I'd be working on the 12th floor. So I'd have to come all the way downstairs to go to the loo and then go all the way back upstairs. But maybe if there was toilets in different floors, different areas, it would help the situation. And I think hotbedding is such a bad thing. Like, oh my God. I used to work in residentials quite a lot. And you'd find, and again, this is just my experience, but you'd find like Punjabi guys, for example, renting, a 4-bed house. There'd be like 12 or 13 of them living there. Yeah. And those conditions, they're also bringing to construction sites. So they're snotting on the floor. And I'm not just saying Punjabi guys, by the way. I'm saying this could be any, I'm not saying Punjabi guys are bad, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying, like, they're snotting on the floor, they're phlegming. And then it's the whole environment does need to change. And there needs to be more awareness around that, doesn't it?
Yeah, there definitely does. And it's, if you turning up every day and working in them conditions, you ain't going to want to do it. And again, it doesn't matter the size of the scale that you're working on. And I think people, if they are doing the extensions on people's houses or the renovations, I think they need to relook at the budget, and they need to work out that, we need a toilet. I think it's about £26 a week, I think, to have a toilet on house. So, I mean, depending where you are in the country, but I reckon it's between, depending on the term that you have it, I reckon it's between 25 and 40 quid a week to have it on there. And you can have it, they'll come out and they'll clean it and they'll refresh it every single week. And then I think for every 10 people, it's one portaloo. So they might, on domestic stuff, there's never really more than 10 people, is there really, at any one point on it? So it's a small part. You can work it into the cost. And again, it makes you look a bit more professional as well. Because the last thing you want
It
is to
does.
look at if you're having an extension done in your house, and you like a lot of people do work from home nowadays, and you look out in the garden,
Mm.
and the builder's having a pee in your flower pot. You don't want it, do you?
Yeah.
But if they've got, they can stick it next to the skip in front of the road out of the way, and they
Hmm.
can come and service it every week. It's clean. You're not tramping dirt in the house if they're allowing you to use the facilities in the house. You're keeping it separate.
Absolutely.
It's one of them. You'd work in the price if you needed to hire a mini digger to come and dig the excavations, wouldn't you?
Of
So
course.
this is
Yeah.
exactly the same. Work it into your price. But people just think, well, that's how I've done it for years, and I don't really need a toilet. I can get away with it. It's like I always
Yeah.
like vans. I always run the newest vans I can, the one that my budget allows. And people say to me, "Why are you wasting the money on a brand new van all the time?" Well, that van gets me work, and it is a tool at the end of the day. And if I had, so I'm a bricklayer, if I had a trowel right where the handle was hanging off it, yeah, I could push the handle
Of
back on every
course.
day and I could do the job. But it becomes a pain in the backside, and it doesn't look professional
Yeah.
again. And if my van is sat outside of a job and it's a rust bucket, it's falling apart, that's all the budget allows, and 100% I get that. But at the same time, if you can go out and get a slightly newer van, it's going to be more reliable. It's going to look better outside the job. It's going to make you look more professional. You ain't going to get to it every morning and go, please start, please start, please start, please start. And it's going to stop you earning money. It's an investment in yourself at the end of the day. I tell you another thing that people never, ever, ever spend money on. Boots. You're in your work boots 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, however
Yeah.
many hours. And you see people with holes in them, the feet are falling. I'm like, what happens, right? If your feet drop off, are you going to be able to walk? Like, no. I'm like, so why are you walking around with holes in your boots? And even if you are self-employed and you can't do it, you can buy boots for 40 quid now. And even if you
Yeah.
have to buy 4 pairs in a year, I personally buy, or I used to when I was on site, I used to buy Timberland boots or cat boots. There might be
Same.
120.
Yeah. Timberlands were comfy.
Yeah, they were comfy. They might be 120 quid, but I get a year out of them. 120 quid throughout the
Yeah.
year when I'm in them
Mm.
13 hours a day, instead of putting 2 broken Weetabix on my feet every single day and hoping I'm going to be all right. And then going home and going, why have I got athlete's foot? And why are my feet constantly cold? Why is my foot hurting? Why is the skin splitting on my feet? You're not looking after it.
Of
Like,
course.
we are the most important
Yeah.
tool we have in our toolbox. And if we don't look after us and we don't give back
100%.
into us, then all the tools and all the equipment and all the fancy bits that we have outside is absolutely worthless if you don't have that person to operate them or use those tools or build those bricks or go and do the electrics on site. So you need to look after yourself.
And I think you're so right. When we look at, going out on a weekend, spending 100 quid, it's done like that, easy, no worries. But those boots, which although look like a big investment at first, we have to bear in mind we're going to be using them for a consistent amount of time. And if they last a year, that's bloody good. Mine personally didn't last a year because I consistently scuffed them up and needed a new pair. But even if they last 9 months, that's 9 months over. £120 over 9 months is actually not a lot of money, especially when you can claim it back on expenses. So don't worry about it too much.
Exactly. In fact, it's tax return season, isn't it? And you can put it into your tax return, so you don't.
There you go. There's always a way. There's always a way. But I think the construction industry in general is. I want to emphasize this. It is such a good industry to work in, and I think a lot of people do see the negatives to it. But I really want to add some positivity to the construction industry to inspire the young people to come in and educate themselves in the industry. And I want to emphasize that yes, there is work in progress when it comes to mental health, when it comes to perks, when it comes to well-being. But honestly, construction workers are open. They're fun to be around. It's no day's the same day. And I just want to emphasize to young people here that it is an incredible feeling. Like you will know this feeling, but when you do a bit of work and you look at it and you go, I did that. Or you walk past a building that you've helped make, and you walk past it and you tell your missus or your partner, go, I worked in that. Like, it's an incredible feeling. It's so like, No, I think it got to one stage, right, where I don't know if it's still there now. I don't live in London, but in Piccadilly Circus, Leicester Square, there's a Lego shop. And every time I walk past it, I tell my missus, I done a bit of work in there, I done the electrical work in there. And she'd
You're
be
not
like,
Lego over there. I built that.
Vish, come on, mate. I've heard this so many times. I'm sick of hearing it now, but you get so much passion and pride from it, don't you? So
Yeah,
I really want to
absolutely.
emphasize that it is
And
a
you can come in this
brilliant industry to
industry,
work in.
like people say that, oh, if you're failing at school, you'll end up in construction. Good, because like you can come in this industry and you can start at whatever level you can start as a labourer on site, and before you know it, you can work your way up because there's tons of training stuff you can do and on-site learning and things like that. And you could become a tradesperson, and then if you want to progress it, you can come into management. And then if you want to maybe go off to the side, you can do engineering. Or if you want to go off a different route, you can do pre-construction stuff. Or if you wanted, you could go abroad and you could take your skills abroad because the
Absolutely.
qualifications you get in this country are that good. People want you all over the
Yeah.
world, and you can go all over the world and you can work on those big projects or the small projects, or you can go and do work anywhere you want to go. If you want to emigrate to a different country, people will always have you if you've got the qualifications that you achieved in the UK. They'll take you anywhere.
Absolutely. And even if we go even further than that, there's not many industries where you can train and then start your own company so quickly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you can go out there and it might be small. It might be, for me, it might be change, like as an electrician, it might be change a socket, change a light switch, which
Yeah.
would then lead to, another job, like install a new socket, install a new light switch, and then it will lead to a small rewire, then a big rewire. And then all of a sudden it just expands and there's not many industries you can go out, train, get some education, and within 5 years you're just starting your own company and you're working for yourself. And I just need to emphasize this is a brilliant industry. There's work in progress, but if you're a young person listening to this, please don't be deterred by it. Like really come in and there's endless opportunities in construction, endless. And I think that really does need to be encouraged and spoken about more.
Yeah, absolutely. You can come in and the world is literally your oyster. You can take it wherever you want to take it to whatever level you want to take it to as well. Because all those big tier one contractors that I used to work on, the McAlpines and the Leases and the BAMs, all started somewhere, and that was that they started their apprenticeship, and it took them wherever.
Absolutely, Rob. I'm sad to say we're coming up to the hour. So I don't want to. I don't want to go over, and I did promise an hour, so I will try my best to stick to it. But I do want to say, like, honestly, thank you so much for jumping on this podcast, being so vulnerable from the get go, and being you. I feel like this is just a conversation I've had with a friend who I've known for a long time, and that openness really, really made me feel comfortable, and I hope the listeners also feel comfortable. So thank you so much. Your knowledge and wisdom has been just, you can't. Thank you. I can't really say much more.
Thank you for having us on. I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
And if you don't mind, I'd love a part 2 to this because I think you've got so much knowledge that I want to grab. And I think together we can share so many stories. I think it'll be nice in the new year to maybe, connect again and speak more about this situation.
Yeah, definitely. I'll come on and I can tell you some more Portaloo stories. That's not a problem. We've got me, and then we can talk about it. But no, honestly, yeah, I'm more than happy to come on and talk about anything. And if you might get some questions off the listeners, then maybe we could do that, or maybe we could do an Instagram live with it, or however you want to do it. I'm more than happy to do it.
Amazing, Rob. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Cheers, thanks.